All right, welcome back to another Bible study video. We're looking at 1 Peter chapter 4, verses 1 through 11 in this one. The first thing that we're going to do is just circle all the references to God. And when you've done that, I think you should come out with a count of 10 references in these verses. And again, that's just still showing us that Peter has his mind on God at all times. Just every other sentence that he writes, there is a reference to either the Father or to the Son in it. And we just see that even here, he ends what he's saying in this passage with a little doxology. To him belong glory and dominion forever and ever. Amen. And so again, he is just keeping his mind focused on God. And again, he has this dual mind. We've been talking about it this whole time through the book of Peter. He is focused on the past when Christ suffered, but he's also focused on the future when Christ will return in glory. Again, we see that right here in the very opening verse. Therefore, Christ suffered in the flesh, and then down here to him, to Jesus Christ, belong glory and dominion forever and ever. And so again, that is a key theme throughout the book of Peter, this idea of suffering and glory going hand in hand. And again, you can kind of see the breakdown between these two passages. This first paragraph is all about suffering. Christ has suffered, therefore we ought to prepare to suffer as well. Since Christ suffered in the flesh, arm yourselves with the same way of thinking. Know that you will suffer. And not just like we're not just preparing to be heckled and to be mocked and whatnot, but suffering itself or existence itself is suffering. We see this echoed in Romans 8 when Paul is making this whole point. He talks about he considers that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory that is to be revealed to us. Again, that idea of sufferings and glory going hand in hand. For creation waits with eager longing for the revealing of the sons of God. For creation itself was subjected to futility, not willingly, but because of him who subjected it, in hope that the creation itself will be set free from its bondage to corruption and obtain the freedom of the glory of the children of God. So essentially, creation itself has felt the pangs of corruption. Sin has had an effect on creation, and it is longing for the day that it will be set free from it. For we know that the whole creation has been groaning together in the pains of childbirth until now. It has been suffering. And not only the creation, but we ourselves, who have the first fruits of the Spirit, groan inwardly as we wait eagerly for adoption as sons, the redemption of our bodies. So again, existence itself is panged with suffering. It is the pangs of childbirth. That is suffering through and through, but there's also this joyous, momentous moment that we are waiting for, that we are longing for. And the fact that our current situation today does not compare with with that momentous moment when Christ returns. That is why we suffer. And so it doesn't mean that you're getting heckled or mocked or persecuted. Existence itself is to suffer. Again, not doing whatever you want. Verse 3, the time is past that suffices for doing what the Gentiles want to do. We no longer live for human passions, but we live for the will of God. We don't live in sensuality and passions and drunkenness, orgies, drinking parties, and lawless idolatry. And those who do practice those things are surprised when we don't join them. But we know that there is a God who judges all things, who judges the living and the dead. Therefore, we will live for Him. So that's all from the first paragraph here. We will suffer in this life because the spirit within us groans with eager longing to be reunited with Christ and with the Father. Moving on to the second paragraph, we get this. He starts off with the end of all things is at hand. We see that in 1 Peter when he quotes, I think this comes from Isaiah down here at the bottom, verses 24 and 25. All flesh is like grass, and all its glory like the flower of grass. The grass withers and the flower falls, but the word of the Lord remains forever. You see it also echoed in 1 John chapter 2. If you remember from the overview video that I made, you'll know that these three verses here, 15, 16, and 17, are great parallels for the entire book of Peter. If you want to understand the book of Peter, you first have to understand these 3 verses, and that will greatly help your understanding. Do not love the world or the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the desires of the flesh and the desires of the eyes and pride of life, is not from the Father, but is from the world. And the world is passing away along with its desires, but whoever does the will of God abides forever. So again, the end of all things is at hand. Therefore, let us live for God. Let us keep loving one another earnestly. He uses these 2 descriptions of be self-controlled and be sober-minded. And we get an example of this in the book of Matthew when Jesus is describing the end of all things to come. And he gives a description of a thief in the middle of the night. This is Matthew chapter 24, verses 43 and 44. If the master of the house had known in what part of the night the thief was coming, he would have stayed awake and would not have let his house be broken into. So he would have been self-controlled and sober-minded. He would not have fallen asleep. Therefore, you must also be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an hour that you do not expect. Again, you see this following in the parable of the 10 virgins. There's these 10 virgins who run out to go greet the bridegroom, but the bridegroom is delayed. And half of them didn't bring enough oil, and the other half brought plenty of oil. Finally, the bridegroom is coming, but they had all fallen asleep. And there's a cry in the middle of the night that says, "Here comes the bridegroom, come and meet him." And the foolish said to the wise, "Give us some of your oil, for our lamps are going out." And the wise answered, saying, Since there will not be enough for us and for you, go rather to the dealers and buy for yourselves. And we see that it's too late. The 5 who did not bring enough oil, who had to go out and find their own at the last moment, they come to the wedding and they say, "Lord, Lord, open to us." But he answered, "Truly I say to you, I do not know you." And so we prepare for the day knowing that we do not know when the bridegroom is coming. And so we ought to be sober-minded and be self-controlled presently, because we do not know whether it will be today or 1,000 years from now that Jesus would return. So we know that there is a God who judges all things and will judge all things. Therefore, let us live as though we truly believe that. Let us love one another earnestly. Let us show hospitality without grumbling. Let us use our gifts to serve one another so that in all things God may be glorified through Jesus Christ. Finally, we'll look at some phrases that are repeated. You'll see that Peter actually repeats himself a lot from the first few chapters of this letter. There's a lot of references to chapter 1, 2, and 3 in this. So right off the rip, we see, arm yourselves with the same way of thinking. Christ suffered in the flesh, therefore arm yourselves with the same way of thinking. We see that echoed in 1 Peter chapter 2, specifically verse 21. To this you have been called, because Christ also suffered for you, leaving you an example so that you might follow in his footsteps. Again, we see down here that there is a God who will judge the living and the dead. And we see that echoed in chapter 2, verse 23. Jesus Christ, when he was reviled, he did not revile in return. And when he suffered, he did not threaten, because he entrusted himself to him who judges justly. And so if we truly believe that there is a God who judges justly and righteously, then we can endure suffering. We see this, again, we just looked at 1 John chapter 2, but this idea that we no longer live for human passions, but for the will of God. And we live for the will of God because we know that the will of God will endure. Again, the world is passing away along with its desires, but whoever does the will of God abides forever. So if you want to experience eternity, then we must do the will of God. We also see in a couple of references to the first chapter of Peter, for the time that is past suffices for doing what the Gentiles want to do. We see this in verse 14 when he says, as obedient children, do not be conformed to the passions of your former ignorance. The time is past for that. We no longer live conformed to the passions of our former ignorance, but now we live for the will of God. And again, he says to keep loving one another earnestly. And this is repeated again, verse 22 of the first chapter. Having purified your souls by your obedience to the truth for a sincere brotherly love, love one another earnestly from a pure heart, since you have been born again. Therefore, we ought to love one another. And then finally, there's one more cross-reference to chapter 3, verse 7. He says, let us be self-controlled and sober-minded for the sake of our prayers. This is the second time that Peter has mentioned something that can hinder your prayers. And so the first time that he mentioned it was when husbands do not honor their wives, when husbands do not live with their wives in an understanding way. He says that can hinder your prayers. And again, right here, he says it will hinder your prayers if you are not self-controlled and sober-minded. So let us be self-controlled. Let us be sober-minded. Let us remember that there is a God who judges justly and righteously, and live for Him in all things. So that is our study for this week. Go ahead and give it some more prep on your own. And thanks for watching.